Welcome to episode 370 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I am interviewing Steve Kostanski. He is a Canadian filmmaker. He got his start doing special effects, makeup, and creatures up in Canada, and he has now moved into writing and directing his own feature films. It's a great story about how he progressed, and he goes into it in some great detail. So stay tuned for that interview. SYS's six-figure screenplay contest is open for submissions. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. The early bird deadline is March 31st. After that, it goes up by $10. So if your script is ready, definitely submit early. We're looking for low-budget shorts and features. I'm defining low budget as less than six figures. In other words, less than $1 million. For shorts, we're defining it as five figures or less, so well less than $10,000. We've got lots of industry judges reading scripts in the later rounds. We're giving away thousands in cash and prizes. And the winning script from last year was taken by one of our industry judges to a great production company that then optioned the script, and they're hoping to begin shooting later this spring. So hopefully I'll have an update on that soon. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about or perhaps enter, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast. And then again, just look for episode number 370. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing Canadian filmmaker Steve Kostanski. Here is the interview. Welcome, Steven, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I had like a pretty creative upbringing. My mom was an artist, and so she got me into arts and crafts very early on. My dad's very technical, so he got me more into like computers and that kind of stuff. And I was always an avid movie fan. But when my parents moved one of our VCRs into the basement, and I had full like control over it to watch whatever movie I wanted, and like pause and back up and like watch scenes over and over again. That really like sparked my imagination to want to become a filmmaker because I was able to obsess over movies and just start breaking apart like how they're made. And then also my parents got me Army of Darkness on VHS in the late 90s. It was the Anchor Bay VHS that had special features on the end. And so I watched the making of Army of Darkness. And in that I saw the creature effects team at Kane VFX building all the ghouls and things and skeleton puppets for that movie. And that was a huge inspiration for me and made me want to break into not just filmmaking, but also just creature effects specifically. So aside from making my own independent films, I also work in prosthetics and have been doing that since about 2004 pretty consistently. I live in Toronto now, and I've been working for various effects companies in the city on different shows.
Gotcha. And so how does one living in Canada, a young kid, how do you get into making prosthetics? Did you go to film school? Did you just find some people that do this and became an apprentice? How does someone launch a career in that?
I found the one guy in Winnipeg who did prosthetics, a guy named Doug Morrow, who's the only prosthetics artist in Manitoba, or at least at the time he was. And so I just called him up and I wouldn't leave him alone until he let me come to his shop and help him out. So I assisted him doing shop tech work, like making molds and casting pieces and things, and a little bit of sculpting here and there. And so that was my introduction into prosthetics. And then when I moved to Toronto, that little bit of experience that I'd already had helped get my foot in the door at bigger shops. And really, I just kept bouncing from shop to shop, getting more and more experience, and I just kept getting hired. In every shop, I'd learn a new skill or something relating to the job that just helped inform subsequent jobs. And so it's just a case of like meeting the right people and, working hard and just busting your ass and getting your name out there was really all it took.
And so at this point, it's 2004, you're starting this career in prosthetics, the special effects. Did you start to think, well, I also want to write and direct? Did you start writing scripts? Did you start working on shorts? How did that sort of dovetail? And how did you make the transition from, effects guy to writer director?
Well, I actually started in stop motion. Like my earliest form of filmmaking was stop motion animation, which I was doing even before I started prosthetics. My dad loaned me his Super 8 camera when I was about 12. And so I started doing these little animations on film, just frame by frame animations. That was my first taste of filmmaking. So over the years, I would improve my skills at that, but also switch technologies, switch to digital, doing stop motion animation with digital cameras. I started shooting live action movies and combining them with my stop motion. So everything I was doing was special effects based, which was helped by the fact that I was working in special effects as well. And so, since then, my career has just been like jumping back and forth between like either directing my own projects or doing jobs, like directing jobs for hire, or working in prosthetics, designing and building makeup effects or creature effects. It's bounced back and forth between the two.
And how did you get that first professional job as a writer-director? At that point, you had a bunch of shorts that you could kind of show as your resume, and you knew enough people, you were kind of up for these jobs. Maybe talk about that process a little bit.
Well, I had been making shorts and submitting them to local film festivals in Winnipeg. And so I was getting a little bit of attention from that. And then it was around 2006, one of my shorts got into a festival in Toronto and won first place at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. And so that actually opened the doors to me meeting a bunch of Toronto film people. And so I actually, while I was still living in Winnipeg, I started shooting my first feature film, which is called Manborg. And it was a movie that I made for no money, like pocket change, shot it in my parents' garage on a green screen. It's like a big sci-fi fantasy adventure movie for no money, where I utilized all my skills, my like prosthetic skills, my stop motion skills, all that special effects work came into play on that. And so it was enough to be considered a feature film. And so I shopped that around, and actually Toronto distributor Raven Banner picked it up and said, we could probably make you some money on this. And so they bought it. They sold it to distributors like Anchor Bay bought it in Canada. Dark Sky Films in the U.S. bought it. And so that got me a little bit of genre recognition because the movie played film festivals and people watched it and liked it and wanted to see more stuff from me. So it really built off of that. So then my next movie, The Void, that I co-directed with my friend Jeremy Gillespie, that had a bigger budget. It was still independent, still an indie movie, but it had, I believe it ended up being like a $1.7 million budget. And it was this like kind of dark and gritty horror movie. And then off of that movie was when I started getting actual like directing offers, like director for hire jobs. So that's how I got the job on Leprechaun Returns for Sci-Fi Channel. It was like a made-for-TV Leprechaun sequel. Yeah, that was 2018. I directed that. And so, that, gave me the kind of extra funds to be able to make a movie like PG, Psycho Goreman, which was the movie I made after Leprechaun. And that was another independently financed movie. And so, I basically lived off the money I made on Leprechaun while making PG.
Gotcha. And so let's dig into Psycho Goreman, since that's your latest film. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or a log line for this film.
Well, the basic premise is two suburban kids, brother and sister, dig up a monster in their backyard, and he's this ancient evil warlord that wants to conquer the universe, but these kids have a magical gem that allows them to control this monster, who they name Psycho Goreman, or PG for short. And once they resurrect him, it sets off this chain reaction of events of his old cohorts coming to confront him on Earth, as well as other heroes and villains out in the universe coming to have their final showdown with this resurrected evil that these two kids control. And so it's kind of a kids adventure movie with a dark twist and lots of gore and violence.
Gotcha. And it seemed, watching the trailer, I've not seen the full film, but watching the trailer, seemed like a good bit of humor as well. There was a real sort of tongue-in-cheek to it.
Yes. Well, I hesitate to like call movies like horror comedy or sci-fi comedy, because I feel like there's like a stigma with those titles. Like, I like to think of it just like it's just an absurd adventure movie that happens to be funny. Like, I think the comedy is very situational, and it's very much comes out of the weirdness of the characters in the movie. But I do take the mythology of the movie seriously. Like, the fantasy elements are like, those are my real passion. And while I also like to build on those mythologies and take the action and the spectacle of the movie seriously, I do also like to have fun and have a laugh occasionally. And so I like straddling that line between like intense seriousness and absurd comedy, and kind of bouncing back and forth between the two, and always just trying to keep the audience on their toes, not knowing what to expect, what's coming around the corner, is always my goal with this kind of movie.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of it?
I mean, there's key images from the movie that I've had bouncing around my head for a long time. One of them is the main monster, Psycho Goreman, sitting at a drum set, playing the drums with a bunch of kids in their little kid band. It was an absurd image that I didn't know what to do with until one day I was watching the movie Rawhead Rex and kind of ruminating on this idea of that movie of like this ancient evil being resurrected and terrorizing this small town. And I felt like it was such a straightforward like A to B plot of that movie, and I thought like, well, how can you like take this kind of idea and put a twist on it to make it a little more interesting? And so that's when I came up with the idea of like, well, what if it was like mashed with E.T. and it's like this evil monster, this monster that should be in like a horror movie, or the villain in like a Saturday morning cartoon or something, like the most evil thing imaginable paired up with some like rambunctious kids, and not turning it into like a morality tale where it's like he learns to be good or something goofy like that, or obvious like that. And like just really play with the idea of like, well, what if he's evil and he's evil the whole time? Like, then what would happen? And that to me like was really the spark of the movie, and the parallels between this evil ancient warlord alien man against these two kids, these like two kind of like firecracker kids who have all this energy and like are living in their own weird fantasy world in the way that kids typically do, and are full of like all the confidence of young kids before they get like too much self-awareness and self-doubt. And I like that parallel between like spunky kids and evil monster, and just like the interplay between those characters to me is like really the heart of the movie, and was where a lot of the fun comes from. And so once I had that idea in place, it was easy to just hang off all these other kind of crazy set pieces and things off of that basic through line, because I knew I had found like the core concept of the movie.
Yeah. It's fairly high concept. And I'm curious, once you had the script, did you just send it out and try and just get it funded, more traditionally, send it to studios, send it out to agents, managers? Did you do any of that with it?
No, there was none of that. This was a like once in a lifetime scenario where a friend of a friend was looking to invest some money in financing a movie. And he wanted specifically to invest in me, and because he knew that I could do a lot with not a lot of money, as my movie Manborg had demonstrated. So he basically said, like, make something that's kind of like that. And so, I like there was initially like a completely different idea that I started to pursue. And as I was getting bored with that other idea was when I came up with the idea for PG, because it seemed to be the most productive when I'm procrastinating on something else. So I pitched them the new idea and they were all over it and really liked it. So I started writing immediately. And so I feel like that was like the spring of 2018. And by November of that year, we were shooting already. So it was a very quick turnaround. Whereas other movies that I've done, like The Void, was a very long process to get that made. Like we went to the Frontiers Film Market and pitched the movie, had meetings. There was like a way long, like years of process just to get that thing made. Whereas PG, it was like a very quick turnaround from like, I got an idea for a movie to I'm on set shooting a movie. It's probably the fastest turnaround I've ever experienced for that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Take us through your writing process a little bit. Where do you typically write and when do you typically write? Are you a morning person, night person? Do you go to a Starbucks? You need the ambient noise? Do you write at home in silence? What does your writing process look like?
I'm one of those people that needs like a full day to write. And probably out of that full day is maybe like 2 hours of writing. And there's maybe like 4 hours of video games and like 3 hours of just like messing around on the internet and like talking to people on Facebook. Like I'm a procrastinator. I actually don't enjoy writing very much. I find it very frustrating because I'm such a tactile person. Like words on the page to me are kind of like the lamest way of presenting my ideas. Like if I could get away with not writing scripts and just immediately be like, let's go shoot tomorrow, like I would be all over that. Also with this movie, I find with writing, I like to make things as I'm writing because I need physical objects to kind of help understand it. So even like ideas that I'm starting to hash out right now for other projects, like you can see in the background, I've got like some stop motion characters I've been building. And so those are like proof of concept characters because I want to make a thing, like I want to make like a trailer or a short film to go along with whatever my pitch is for that idea. But also just in making those things, like while I'm making them, I'm like thinking up stuff for the script and I'll like write ideas down. So PG was very much like that, where I'd be building effects and like sculpting things. And then while I'm doing that, it's like I have to be doing something to make the writing the procrastinating part, you know? So it's like I have to be playing video games to be like, oh, and then this scene should go like this. And then I'll run to the computer and write the scene out. But if I like sit down and I'm like, I'm going to write today, I will get nothing done because I'm just going to like stare at that blank page and think of the million other things that I would rather be doing. So it's a frustrating process. And I basically have to like trick myself into writing and putting things down on them.
Gotcha. So, how do you break out your scripts in terms of like outlining index cards versus in final draft, you know, cranking out descriptions and dialogue?
Usually, and I have it open like right now, I've got like just Word documents that I'll just throw like single line like ideas or like a line that a character says, and it'll be for different movie ideas. And I just like fill those up, those Word documents, just with stuff. And then eventually that stuff, when I get to that point where it's like I have to make this into a thing, I'll have another Word document that becomes the treatment, where I start taking the stuff and I start arranging it in a rough structure. And then usually I get like halfway through that and I get bored of doing that. And then I open Final Draft. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to make a more polished version of this thing that I'm not even finished. So I'll start taking that treatment, the Word document, I will start putting that into Final Draft and giving it like scene headers. And like once it starts looking like a script almost, I start to feel good, because when it's in the Word document, it just looks like a jumbled mess. But once I start giving myself scenes, that's when I start to build a little bit of momentum, because I'm like, oh, this is starting to feel like a real thing now. So what I like to do, the point that I like to get to where I feel like I've actually accomplished something, is when I have a treatment that's in a final draft document where I have roughly like every scene blocked out, just with like, even if it's just like one paragraph kind of explaining what's happening. But I know kind of like what all the scene breaks are and the overall arc of the movie in a final draft. Like that was the thing that I circulated to everyone for PG when I first showed it to people. Like that was my first pass of the story was like treatment in final draft.
Gotcha. And so let's talk about that process a little bit. I'm always curious to hear people's development process. So you had this sort of incomplete script, which kind of laid out the story roughly in script format. Who did you send that to? Do you have some trusted writer, producer, director friends that you get notes from? Who are those people that gave you feedback?
For people specifically, like the treatment I sent to like the producers / financiers of whatever project was going to be, because I wanted to know like if they aren't into this at all, then I'm gonna scrap this thing. And then, I have a friend, Peter Koplowski, who's a film programmer in Toronto, producer. He's worked on a bunch of my movies, and I like bouncing ideas off of him because he can be very blunt and tell me if something is not good. So I sent him the treatment because I knew like if this is bad, he will tell me it's bad. But he actually called me like a day after I sent it and was like, this is really awesome. Like, you got to keep going with this. Yeah, I do have like a trusted circle, and I also have a trusted circle of people like kind of in different kind of spheres of filmmaking. Like certain people are more like genre oriented, and certain people I trust more purely just for the writing process. Like I have one filmmaker friend, Jason Lepere, who is a great writer. And I like to send stuff to him because I feel like he gives me notes coming from like an actual writer who writes screenplays is like the best thing you can get, like somebody who's actually successful at that job, because he always gives really insightful notes and advice and ways to like change stuff around to make it work better.
Gotcha.
Because he also like people who have like skills with like even just like dialogue specifically, like I'll send it to like that friend who I know is like good, who like comes up with good dialogue, because they'll give me suggestions on how to punch up that kind of stuff. Like I like having a variety of people, because everybody usually I usually come back with something that the other people aren't picking up on. Everybody's looking at a different thing, and so I think the more eyes you have on it, the more you can kind of pick and choose what stuff is actually beneficial to you, and then kind of combine all of that advice into hopefully the best like action for your project.
Yeah, for sure. So I always like to just wrap up the interviews by asking the guest something that they've seen recently that they thought would be great for screenwriters. Hulu, Netflix, HBO. Is there anything you're watching currently that you thought screenwriters could would get a kick out of?
Does it have to be a recent?
No, nothing. Just anything. Yeah, anything you think would be good.
I had never seen the movie Judgement Night up until about a week ago. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not.
Okay, so it's got Emilio Estevez, and it's about a group of guys who they pile in an RV. They live out in suburbia, and their wives let them have like a guy's night. So they all pile in an RV, and they drive downtown. They're going to go to this boxing match. They've got tickets to go watch boxing. And they end up taking a wrong turn, and they end up like on the wrong side of the tracks. They end up in like the bad part of town, and it all just spirals out of control from there. And it's basically them like evading like gangs and just like basically escaping death at every turn. And,
gotcha. And what's it called?
Judgement Night.
Judgement Night. So, well, perfect. That's a good recommendation. Not one I've seen. I'll have to check it out. Hopefully it's on Netflix.
Yeah, it's one of those movies I watched it, and as I was watching, I was like, why have I not seen this movie before? This is so great. And it's a movie I recommend it because it's one of those movies where I really felt the structure of it. Like I was really into the way it was setting up the pieces and how each piece like just built a little bit more tension. Like setting up things like one of the friends like has a gun. like he just has a gun with him for some reason, and they make a conscious decision of showing him like putting it in the drawer like at the front of the RV, and it's such a thing like in this type of movie you like clock that, and you're like, yeah. I need to remember that gun because I hope they remember to take that out later. Like there's those kinds of moments where you're like participating with them as the movie plays out. So yeah, I think it's like a good thing to analyze just in terms of like story structure. I thought it was like really well put together, just a really good movie all around.
So perfect. Well, yeah, that's a great recommendation. How can people see Psycho Goreman? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Well, January 22nd is the like theatrical, whatever that's going to mean on January 22nd. But then also video on demand, digital. So like it'll be available on like iTunes, and then on any kind of like digital download provider. I think it'll be available. I don't have all those details totally memorized. I should, but yeah, I think if you look for it, you'll be able to find it on the 22nd. As far as it being available digitally to download and watch or something like that. So that's the 22nd, but then also in March, we're going to release a Blu-ray and DVD. Okay. And then in May, it's going to be available on Shudder for streaming.
Perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I'll round up for the show notes.
The only thing I really post any kind of fun work stuff to is my Instagram account, which is at Kill Kostanski, Kill_Kostanski. So that's where I like to post my effects work and stuff for people to see. So that's the best place if you need to get in touch with me or see what I'm working on.
Okay, well, perfect. I'll round that up and I'll put that in the show notes. Well, Steven, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me today. Good luck with this film. It looks amazing.
Oh, thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right. Good night. Bye.
I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. There have been a number of success stories come out of the service. You can find out about all the SYS Select successes by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Also on SYS podcast episode 222, I talked with Steve Deering, who was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. These services include the newsletter. This monthly newsletter goes out to a list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, all types of projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. We also have a number of screenwriting classes that are recorded and available in the SYS Select forum. These are all the classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to those whenever you want once you join. The classes cover every part of writing your screenplay, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that is sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Oklahoma filmmaker John Swab. Another great story of someone just getting out there, making things happen for themselves. He's written, directed a crime thriller called Body Brokers about the addiction treatment industry here in the United States. It's a fascinating take on something that's very timely and also very important, obviously, to all of us in this country. And John has wrapped it all into an entertaining film. So we talk about that film, how he got his start. He actually got his start doing a short that was sort of the prequel to this Body Brokers feature that he eventually got made. He talks through that story, how he got the short made, how he was able to take the short out and ultimately turn that into a feature film. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Steve. I love how he began his career. He wasn't out looking to make lots of money. He just had a genuine interest and passion for doing these practical effects and modeling. So he looked around locally, found opportunities, and started to grow from there. I get so many emails from folks outside of Hollywood who think that getting to Hollywood is the answer. And while Hollywood might be a bigger market than your local town or city, it's also a much more competitive market. So even basic stuff like this job that Steve talked about, being a workshop PA in an effects company here in Los Angeles, that would be an incredibly competitive gig to get. And just think about that, like the lowest position at a special effects company here in Los Angeles, it would be very, very difficult to get in there. They're going to have 100 resumes, 150 resumes just for that PA job, which essentially requires no real skill. So keep that in mind. If you can get some experience outside of LA, you're probably in a pretty good position to do it if you live outside of LA. And that experience can actually lead to things. It can actually help you build your resume. Really think about Steve's journey and how he was able to find these local opportunities and, again, just build his career from that. There are probably more of these local opportunities out there than you might think. Again, I want to emphasize this. I'm not suggesting that we all run out and become workshop production assistants at special effects companies, but think about where your passion and your interests lie, and maybe there are some opportunities within that sort of bucket of things that maybe really interest you or things that you are passionate about. The other thing that Steve has done, he separated himself from other filmmakers, including filmmakers like myself. I mean, I've made films, but I don't know really anything about this sort of special effects, how to use this, how to direct this, how to work with actors with this sort of special effects. So no production company is going to hire me to direct a film like this until I can prove that I understand how all of this stuff works, obviously. Now, I've spent my time writing and learning to write, so maybe I can lean into that. I can lean into the screenplay a little bit. At least that's the hope. But the bottom line is these types of movies, these sort of effects heavy with a lot of costuming and just practical effects modeling, these movies are very popular, and I don't really ever see that changing. They're always going to be fun movies, and that's really the bottom line, is that the people that know how to use these effects and really understand how to incorporate them organically into film, there's going to be a market for those folks as a director and a writer, as Steve is finding, because he knows how to use this technology. And again, it doesn't come from a place where he learned it to become a director. It comes from a place of true interest and passion. He got into effects to learn about effects and to learn about that stuff. And again, it's a great place now that he's positioned himself, and he's sort of built a moat around his sort of niche. And there's not always going to be a ton of directors that can direct these types of films. He is leaning into his experience as an effects artist. And again, I'm not suggesting we should all become effects artists, but maybe there is something in your own personal experience, work experience, whatever, that you can lean into with your writing, with your filmmaking. If this movie really takes off, or even is just a modest hit, Steve could start to really move up the ladder in terms of what he's directing, the budgets. Think about how many big movies need exactly this sort of experience. The Star Wars movies, the Marvel movies, Transformers, all of these really high-end movies have a lot of these types of effects, CGI, modeling, and those directors that they're going to pick to ultimately direct those movies are people that really have experience with that and understand that. I saw a quote from Quentin Tarantino once about The Hateful Eight, and he was talking about, you just did Django Unchained, which was also a Western. Why did you want to go back and do a Western? And, his answer was very practical. It was like, on Django Unchained, we learned how to do, and when he says we, I'm sure it was a cinematographer, his team, they learned how to shoot horses. They learned how to work with horses. They learned how to shoot sort of those Western scenes. So it actually makes a lot of sense for them to go and do another Western. And I can't tell you how much these sort of practical experiences actually do help, and they actually do play a part in filmmaking. And certainly in your writing. A friend of mine, when I first got to LA, this was years ago, he dated a woman who was staffed on one of those law type shows. She was a staff writer on one of those law type shows, and her only experience, if you can say only, she had actually been a DA in New York City. She had been a public defender in New York City. And that experience obviously is great to have. Obviously, she was a good writer and stuff, but she was able to lean into that and get on staff on some of these procedural shows. And again, I just really emphasize that it shouldn't be something where you're going out to do it in order to get to that next step. Find something you're truly interested and passionate about, and try and lean into that, and maybe somehow coordinate or find some synergy between that and your writing and your filmmaking. Just exactly like what Steve has done with his own background and experience in the effects industry. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.